Hey everyone! Tonight we begin with a story drenched in rain, silence, and the sound of heels that would mark the start of my undoing. Picture this Memorial Oak Cemetery, Houston, Texas. A gray morning where the sky itself seemed to weep, each raindrop striking the coffin like cold steel against wood. Black umbrellas clustered together, and the scent of lilies mixed with wet soil. My husband, Gordon Reed, was lowered into the earth as the priest's voice trembled over promises of eternal peace.
You might not survive this one. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And I'd love for you to comment below with your location and local time. Let me know where you're listening from. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise. And let's begin tonight's journey together.
I gripped my shawl, trembling, trying to balance grief with the strange emptiness that had seeped into me the moment Gordon's heart stopped beating. 42 years of marriage vanished into one folded flag and a hollow echo. Beside me, my son Nathan sat with swollen eyes, but my daughter-in-law, Sable, was different. She didn't cry. She scanned the mourners like a hostess calculating tips. Beneath her veil, her eyes were sharp, cold, waiting. When the service ended, I touched the coffin once, whispering, "Rest easy, Gordon. I'll be fine. I promise." I had no idea how soon that promise would turn into a vow of survival. The black Mercedes ride home was silent. Nathan clutched his phone like a lifeline. Sable's red nails tapped the steering wheel. And when we turned down the driveway of the River Oaks house, I froze. My 3 suitcases, brown leather, the kind Gordon bought me in Paris decades ago, sat abandoned by the garage, wet and dusted with pollen. Sable met my eyes on the porch, arms crossed. Her lips curved in a smirk. "Oh, Cassandra, I thought you already understood. Things change now. Gordon's gone. You'll be staying in the garage, next to the dogs." Nathan looked at the ground, silent. That's when I realized grief was only the first burial of the day. The second was my place in my own home. I carried my bags into that damp garage with rusted tools, oil stains, and the smell of dog food. And I sat down on a sagging cot. The rain ticked on the roof like a clock marking the beginning of my exile. But Gordon's voice still whispered in my mind, "Cass, when they think you're weak, let them. Silence is your strongest weapon." They thought they had buried me in the garage. What they didn't know was that they had buried me in the very place where I would learn to rise. The first night in that garage was a lesson in humiliation. The walls sweated with dampness, streaked with rust from old tools Gordon had once polished with care. A cracked window overlooked the trash bins, and an iron cot leaned to one side as if it had already surrendered. On the table sat a half-empty box of dog food, placed there by Sable with deliberate cruelty. The smell of oil clung to everything. I lay awake listening to the rain, each drop a reminder that somewhere above me, my son and his wife slept in the master bedroom Gordon and I had shared for decades.
And here I was, cast out like unwanted furniture.
But grief is a strange teacher. In those long hours, I remembered Gordon's words, "Cass, when life pushes you to the ground, don't waste your breath crying into the dirt. Use the ground to push yourself back up." I whispered to the ceiling, All right, Gordon, I'll start from here.
Morning came early. At 6, the garage door creaked open, and Sable appeared, holding a cup of coffee with steam rising from it like a cruel joke. "Breakfast," she said lightly. "Nathan likes eggs Benedict. The kids prefer pancakes. I'll have a salad." She didn't ask, she instructed, as if I were her new maid. Then she glanced at the dog food and smiled faintly. "Oh, and don't forget their meal, too."
I nodded. My silence was a cloak, hiding the storm building inside. In the kitchen, I laid out eggs, bacon, bread, and oranges. The note she had scribbled still taped to the fridge. I cooked with steady hands, though my heart ached remembering Gordon whistling as he flipped toast on Saturday mornings. Now the counters gleamed with sterile perfection, the warmth gone like he'd never existed. Nathan came downstairs, his voice low, almost guilty. "Morning, Mom." He kissed my cheek, eyes darting away. I smiled gently. "Did you sleep well?" He only muttered, "Kind of," then hurried to his phone. Sable followed in heels, clicking across the floor, flipping open a glossy magazine. "Press my navy dress, please?" Oh, and clean the nude heels. I noticed a stain. Her tone was light, but each word was meant to cut. I said nothing. Silence is sharper than any blade. After breakfast, I washed dishes, wiped counters, folded towels. Every chore became a ritual of endurance. The children, Ava and Liam, peeked at me from the staircase. Ava whispered, "Grandma, why don't you sit with us?" Before I could answer, Sable snapped, "Upstairs. Kids. Grandma needs to finish the dishes." Their eyes lingered, uncertain, before they disappeared. By noon, I was hanging laundry in the backyard. The magnolia tree Gordon had planted towered above me, blossoms glowing white against the sun. I remembered his laughter one day. "Cass, when you're old, you'll just sit under this tree and rest." Now I was old, but there was no resting, only planning. That evening, as Sable chatted on her phone in the living room, her voice carried down to the garage. "Free maid service?" She laughed to a friend. "Honestly, it saves me so much." The woman on the other end giggled. I froze with the dish towel in my hand. I wanted to scream that the free maid had once written the first check for the down payment on this house, but I didn't. Instead, I folded the towel neatly and tucked the memory away. Because silence, when used wisely, is not weakness, it's the sound of preparation. That night, I opened Gordon's leather notebook, the one he gave me for our 40th anniversary. Its cover was worn, still faintly scented of his cologne. I wrote my first entry. Day 1. They think I've lost my worth, but I won't remind them. I'll let them reveal who they really are. And I'll be ready. Old age wisdom says patience is not the ability to wait, it's how you act while waiting. Did you know some scholars debate whether humiliation destroys the soul or steals it? They say it depends on whether the humiliated believe the insult is deserved. I smiled faintly at that, because I knew none of this was deserved. And as the rain tapped the garage roof, I made a vow I would rise, not with shouting or fists, but with the quiet strength of someone who knows exactly what she holds. What Sable didn't know was that Gordon had left everything, every account, every villa, every bond, under my name. $19 million and the Azure Cove estate. They thought I was powerless,
but the keys were already in my hand. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of obedience at least. That's how it looked from the outside. Each morning, I rose before the alarm, made their coffee, pressed Sable's dresses, packed Ava and Liam's lunches, and scrubbed every surface until the counters gleamed. My silence became their routine, the background noise of their comfortable lives. But inside, I was awake. I carried Gordon's leather notebook everywhere, tucked discreetly into my cardigan pocket. At first, I jotted down simple things when Nathan left for work. What Sable wore, the time Ava's bus pulled up. But soon, my notes grew sharper the way Sable checked her reflection twice before pretending to go to yoga. The calls she made in hushed tones. The way Nathan always avoided my eyes when she ordered me around. I was building a map, not of street, but of weaknesses. One afternoon, I was folding laundry in the den when Ava tiptoed in, clutching her sketchbook. "Grandma," she whispered. "Why do you live in the garage? Daddy says it's just for a little while." I smoothed the towel in my lap and smiled faintly. Sometimes grown-ups make choices they think are smart, but aren't kind. And sometimes, the kindest people wait until the right moment to remind everyone who they are. She tilted her head. Like in fairy tales, when the queen comes back. I chuckled softly. "Exactly, sweetheart." Her eyes widened, a spark of hope lighting them. Then she ran off before Sable could notice. That night, I overheard a conversation drifting from the living room. Sable's voice, slick as honey. I looked up nursing homes in Dallas. Much cheaper than keeping her here. Don't tell Nathan, I'll convince him when the time's right. I stood in the hallway, rag in hand, and let each word drip into me like acid. Cheaper, nursing home. She was already planning my eviction, as if I were an expense line in her budget. But instead of anger, I felt clarity. And I wrote in my notebook, Day 7. Sable researching nursing homes. Key leverage point. Her greed leaves trails. Gules. The following morning, as I ironed clothes in Sable's dressing room, I caught sight of a credit card statement left carelessly on her vanity. The bold numbers jumped out: spa retreat in Aspen, yoga retreat in California, several $1,000s each. Nathan had told me just last week his company was cutting budgets, and here she was, burning through money like gasoline. I didn't touch the paper. I didn't need to. I simply recorded it Day 8. Expenses don't match income. Nathan unaware. Later that day, I baked cookies, chocolate chip, Ava's favorite. When I set them out, she hesitated, whispering, "Mom said you don't need to do this anymore." I smiled. "I do it because I love it." She glanced around, then bit into one. Her little brother Liam snatched two and slipped them into his pocket. "Don't tell your mom," I whispered. And their laughter floated through the house like a memory of what family used to feel like. That evening, Sable came home in her silk blouse, hair flawless, perfume thick enough to coat the air. On her phone, her voice turned syrupy. "Yes, I'll move the money by the weekend. Just finalize the paperwork." She spotted me folding laundry and flashed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Cassandra, don't forget to polish the silverware tonight. Guests notice everything." I nodded, but my mind was already racing. When night fell and the house grew quiet, I crept upstairs to Gordon's old office. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. I switched on the ancient desktop computer, its screen casting a pale blue glow. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear anticipation. Password the date of our wedding anniversary. Gordon had never changed it.
The records opened like a book. Bank accounts, statements, withdrawals. And there it was, Serene Holdings, LLC. Thousands of dollars drained each month, deposited into a shell company with no employees. No address, only a box in Dallas. My pen scratched across the notebook, money disappearing. Confirm later? Stay silent with Nathan. I shut the computer off, heart pounding, and tiptoed back to the garage. Outside, the magnolia tree swayed gently in the night breeze, its blossoms pale against the dark sky. I pulled the thin blanket over my shoulders and whispered to myself, "All right, Cassandra. Every trap needs patience, and every liar leaves evidence." Old age wisdom says silence is like soil. You bury a seed in it, and people think it's dead. But wait long enough, and something powerful breaks through. Did you know historians argue that silence can be either consent or resistance, depending on who writes the record? For me, silence wasn't giving in. It was loading the bowstring, and I was just about ready to draw. The morning after my discovery, the house looked the same, sunlight spilling over polished granite counters, the smell of brewed coffee drifting down the hall, but everything felt different to me. I'd seen behind the curtain. The glossy perfection was nothing more than borrowed paint over rotting wood. Sable floated into the kitchen in her silk robe, hair already curled, lips painted with a shade too sharp for breakfast. She smiled faintly. "Egg whites today, Cassandra. And don't forget, the kids have piano practice at 4. Make sure their uniforms are pressed." I nodded, setting the pan on the stove. Outwardly, I was her unpaid help. Inwardly, I was a detective with evidence she couldn't even guess at. That afternoon, I slipped into Gordon's office again, my hands steady now as I combed through the numbers. The pattern was undeniable. Large sums funneled into Serene Holdings, LLC every month, masked as consulting fees. I dug deeper, tracing transactions until I found the connection: Derek Cole, a name attached to brokerage firms in Dallas. I wrote carefully in the notebook, Day 10, Sable tied to Derek Cole. Money laundering through shell company. Confirmed pattern. The room was still. The only sound was the whir of the computer fan. I touched Gordon's old chair, running my fingers over the worn leather where he once sat, and whispered, "You built everything for us, Gordon. She thinks she's clever enough to strip it away. But you left me more than money. You left me clarity." Later, Nathan returned from work, his tie loose, eyes tired. He kissed Sable on the cheek as she laughed over her phone, then disappeared upstairs. He barely noticed me carrying laundry past him, but Ava noticed. She tugged my sleeve when Sable wasn't looking and whispered, "Grandma, Daddy doesn't smile anymore." I crouched down, smoothing her hair. Sometimes adults forget how. But don't worry. Ava, your father still knows how to smile. He just needs reminding. She nodded, though her eyes were older than her years. That evening, as I polished silverware, Sable strutted in with her laptop under her arm. She didn't even glance at me before answering a call on speaker. Derek's voice filled the room, smooth and oily. "We'll need to move quickly. The shell account can't handle another transfer without questions."
Sable's tone was sharp. "Don't worry. Nathan's clueless. His mother won't be a problem either. She's practically invisible."
I paused mid-polish, holding a fork so tightly my knuckles whitened. Invisible. That's what she thought of me. When the call ended, she caught me staring at her. For a split second, her eyes narrowed, but then she smiled sweetly. "Don't forget to wash the windows tomorrow." Guests notice streaks.
Notice. I lowered my gaze, playing the role she'd written for me, but my heart was steady as stone.
That night, in the garage, I added a new line to the notebook, invisible. Let her think so.
I slept little. The damp air pressed against my skin. The distant hum of traffic like a reminder of the world moving on outside these walls. But my mind was alive.
The next day, I visited the corner cafe. Sable thought I was shopping for groceries, but I slipped into a booth with my old friend Caleb Morton, Gordon's lawyer. I slid the notebook across the table, open to the pages of numbers and dates.
His eyes scanned them quickly. You're right. This isn't household spending. Someone's bleeding the accounts. But, Cassandra, you need to be careful. Sable plays dirty.
I sipped my cappuccino, the foam bitter on my tongue. I'm not afraid of dirty. Caleb, I've scrubbed it my whole life, but I won't let her bury Gordon's legacy.
He nodded, lowering his voice. Start keeping copies of everything. Don't just note it, record it.
I smiled faintly. Already one step ahead. I tapped my purse where Gordon's old phone rested, its camera ready. That evening, Sable came home late, perfume clouding the air. She breezed past me, heels clattering on the tile. Long yoga class, she muttered. But I caught the edge of an envelope poking from her designer bag, the kind no one takes to stretch poses on a mat. I wrote one line before bed day 12. Yoga now spelled with $signs.
Old age wisdom says liars always forget one thing. They think the person they underestimate has no memory. Did you know some philosophers argue money itself is an illusion? Only valuable because we all pretend it matters. Maybe that's true. But power built on lies is even more fragile. It crumbles the moment someone whispers, I saw you, and I had seen her. Clearly. The morning I drove to Caleb's office. Houston was already awake, with honking horns and a heavy haze pressing down on the skyline. I wore a simple cream dress, my hair tied back, and carried only a small handbag. To anyone passing by, I was just another widow running errands. But in truth, I was walking into the next chapter of my defense. Caleb greeted me at the door with the same calm presence he'd always had. His office smelled faintly of leather and Earl Grey, the kind of place Gordon once called a fortress in paper form. On the table sat a thick blue folder, heavier than grief. This, Caleb said, sliding it toward me, is Gordon's final arrangement. He transferred every major asset, stocks, bonds, properties, the Azure Co Villa into your name alone. No co-ownership, no loopholes. Cassandra, it's all yours. I opened the folder. The ink of Gordon's signature looked as alive as if he'd written it yesterday. At the back was a handwritten note. Make sure Cass never has to ask permission to live in her own home. Never. My throat tightened. A sob slipped out before I could catch it. Caleb touched my hand gently. He prepared this more than a year ago, after a health scare. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of you being cornered. I whispered. He knew. Yes, Caleb said softly, and he trusted you to hold it. I left the office with copies of every document, tucked carefully into my bag. The city's noise seemed quieter that day, almost reverent. Sunlight broke through clouds, glinting off the rooftops. And I thought Gordon is still protecting me, even from the grave. At a small cafe on the way home, I ordered a cappuccino, his Sunday favorite. As I stirred the foam, I opened my phone and set up a new encrypted email, backing up every file Caleb had given me. I even created a second drive labeled Lotus, the nickname Gordon once used in his letters, Cass. You're like a lotus rising from mud but never stained. I smiled. Even in secrecy, he'd left me his blessing. When I arrived home, the scent of perfume hit me before I even opened the front door. Sable was in the living room, speaking in that syrupy voice she reserved for people she wanted to impress. Yes, I can move the money by the weekend. Just keep the Dallas paperwork ready.
Her eyes flicked to me as I set my bag down. She ended the call with a laugh. Oh, you're back? Good. Can you press my ivory blouse before dinner? I nodded lightly, though my fingers itched to pull the evidence from my bag and lay it all before her. But I didn't, because power isn't in the reveal, it's in the waiting. That night, I sat in the garage with Gordon's notebook open, writing day 15. Gordon's fortress is mine. She thinks I am powerless. She has no idea she's living in my house, eating on my money, and walking on ground already signed to me. Old age wisdom says the strongest weapon isn't anger, but preparation. And did you know, in chess, the queen is considered the most powerful piece. Not because she strikes first, but because she waits until the board opens, then moves everywhere at once. That night, I realized I was no longer the pawn Sable thought she'd trapped. I was the queen, waiting for her move. The word yoga took on a whole new meaning in my house. Whenever Sable mentioned it, her tone dripped with a sweetness I'd never heard when she spoke to me or Nathan. One Thursday morning, she appeared in leggings and a loose sweater, hair pinned in a bun. She grabbed her designer bag and said breezily, "I'll be at yoga until noon." But I caught the shimmer of her silver eyeshadow and the faint trail of perfume neither belonged in a sweaty studio. I waited 10 minutes after she left, then slipped Gordon's old phone into my purse. Its camera was outdated, but still reliable. I called a cab and instructed the driver to follow her pearl-white BMW. He raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Maybe he'd seen women like me before, quiet, desperate, but determined. We trailed her through downtown Houston until she pulled into the Argonaut Hotel, an upscale tower gleaming with glass and gold trim. Yoga? Indeed. I watched as she stepped out. Transformed heels clicking, hair cascading in curls, an aqua silk dress hugging her frame. She smiled the kind of smile I'd never seen directed at my son. My stomach sank. Inside the lobby, she met him. Derek Cole. Young, polished, with slicked back hair and the charm of a man who sold dreams for a living. He slid a brown envelope across the table. She leaned forward, laughing, her hand brushing his lapel like she was sealing a promise. From behind a planter, I pressed record. My heart hammered, but my hands didn't shake. I caught her smile, his touch, the envelope, evidence. That evening, when she returned home, she was back in her yoga clothes, hair tied up, cheeks flushed with fake effort. "Class was packed today," she said, sipping water. I met her eyes, expression neutral. "Yes," I murmured. I imagine it was quite invigorating. Her lips froze for half a second before she forced a laugh. "You're funny, Cassandra." But inside, I was thinking checkmate always begins with the smallest move. That night, I wrote in my notebook day 21. Video evidence hotel. Derek Cole. Cash envelope. Truth captured. Old age wisdom says cheaters are like actors, they forget the audience is taking notes. And did you know some academics argue betrayal is necessary for civilization because it forces us to create rules? I chuckled as I wrote it down. Maybe betrayal was necessary. It had awakened me from my long silence. And now, I wasn't just awake. I was ready. I don't think I breathed the night I opened her laptop. The glow spilled across the living room like a spotlight. Her careless mistake. She had gone upstairs, humming, leaving the screen alive with secrets she thought I would never see. I slipped into the chair, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. My pulse thundered in my ears, but my hand was steady. There, at the top of her inbox, sat an email chain that made my skin go cold. The subject line read, "Divorce paperwork nearly finished." Just waiting on the estate confirmation, I scrolled slowly. Each line was worse than the last. Her attorney, David Carrera, outlined the plan with brutal precision once the assets were confirmed. She would file for divorce. Custody of Ava and Liam would be leveraged. Nathan's inheritance would be funneled through shell companies. And me, ensure the mother-in-law is institutionalized before proceedings. My throat tightened. She wasn't just plotting to humiliate me, she was ready to erase me. I pulled Gordon's old USB drive from my purse, hands quick now, and copied everything. Email threads, attachments, scanned documents, even a draft of the divorce filing. Each click was a nail in her coffin. Then I photographed the screen with Gordon's phone, frame by frame. When I returned to the garage, I saved duplicates in my secret Lotus folder and sent a copy to Caleb. Subject line, "Keep this for me, in case it's needed." I sat back in the silence, staring at the yellow lamp on my nightstand. She believed she was orchestrating the endgame, but I had just flipped the board. The next morning, Nathan came into the kitchen bleary-eyed. His tie hung loose, his shoulders hunched. "Mom," he murmured, "don't let Sable push you too hard. She's under stress. Things will calm down." I smiled faintly, though every part of me wanted to shake him awake. "It's all right, Nathan," I said softly. "I know exactly where I stand." And I did, in possession of her lies, her betrayal, her entire blueprint of greed. Later that evening, I overheard her on the phone again. Her laugh was shrill, bubbling like champagne. "Oh, David, it's perfect. He's too blind to see. His mother's just a nuisance. Once the court sees she's unstable, we'll have everything." I closed my eyes, holding the dish towel tighter. She had no idea her words were already mine to wield. In the garage that night, I wrote in the notebook, day 28, emails secured, divorce plotted, key evidence in hand. Nathan's still blind, but truth will open his eyes. Old age wisdom says people who set traps often fall into them first. And here's a quirky fact in Roman law. Forged wills were punishable by death because betrayal of family was seen as betrayal of society itself. Academics still debate whether that was too harsh, but staring at those emails, I understood why. Because betrayal doesn't just take money. It corrodes trust, the very fabric that holds people together. And once trust is gone, no court on earth can bring it back. The day Nathan stumbled across Gordon's will, the air in the house shifted. It was early morning when I heard his voice call from upstairs, shaken, almost childlike. "Mom, can you come here a second?" My heart raced as I climbed the stairs. For months, Gordon's office door had stayed closed, heavy with dust and silence. But now it stood open, sunlight cutting across the oak desk. Papers were scattered as though a restless hand had rifled through them. And in Nathan's grip was the very document Sable had feared most: Gordon's original will. His eyes were wide, confused, desperate. This house, it's yours. Everything's in your name.
I stepped forward slowly, my voice calm. Yes, your father wanted it that way. He was afraid of what might happen when he was gone. Before Nathan could answer, Sable stormed into the doorway. Her lipstick was still bright from the morning, her eyes sharp as glass. "What is that?" she snapped, striding forward. Nathan hesitated, but she yanked the papers from his hand and skimmed them with a feverish intensity. Her face darkened. Her voice rose to a shriek. "No, this isn't possible. You..." She pointed at me, trembling with rage. "You've been pretending to be helpless. All to manipulate us." Her words sliced the air, but I didn't flinch. I simply sat in Gordon's chair, folding my hands. "Manipulate? No, Sable. I stayed silent to see what you'd do when you thought you had power." Nathan's face crumpled with shame. He looked between us, his lips trembling. "Sable, is this true? Did you know about this?" She let out a bitter laugh, shrill and unhinged. "Oh, Nathan, she's been playing you. Can't you see? She's laughing at us. You've let her rot in the garage while she held the deed to everything all along." I reached into my bag. My fingers brushed the edge of the photographs, the emails, the damning evidence I had prepared for this moment. Calmly, I laid them on the desk photos of her at the hotel with Derek, the brown envelope in her hand, the emails planning divorce and institutionalization. Nathan froze. His lips parted, his face drained of color as he read the lines aloud. "Divorce paperwork nearly finished. Waiting on the estate confirmation. Ensure the mother-in-law is institutionalized." His voice cracked. He looked at her with eyes I hadn't seen since he was a boy, eyes that held both fury and heartbreak. Sable's hand trembled as she slammed the papers back on the desk. "You followed me. You spied on me." I leaned forward, my voice level, unshaken. "No, Sable. I simply paid attention. Something you never thought I'd do." The room fell silent, but for the tick of the old clock on the wall. Nathan lowered his head, whispering so softly I almost missed it. "I've been so blind." I touched his arm gently. "Not blind, son, just afraid. And silence. Silence can be crueler than betrayal." That night, back in the garage, I wrote in Gordon's notebook, day 35. Truth revealed. Nathan shaken. Sable cornered. The tide has turned. Old age wisdom says when a mask cracks, you can't piece it back together. And here's a quirky fact in ancient Greek theater. Masks were painted with exaggerated expressions, so even those at the back could see the truth. Maybe that's why betrayal feels so sharp, because once revealed, it's exaggerated for everyone to witness. Sable's mask had cracked, and there was no hiding now. The storm broke at noon. Nathan stood in the living room, fists clenched, shoulders squared in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager standing up to a bully. His voice trembled, but carried through the house. "Sable, enough. Get out." Her heels struck the stairs as she descended, each click sharp, like a blade hitting stone. She wore a crimson dress, lips painted to match, as if dressing for battle. She laughed bitterly. "Get out, Nathan. Don't be ridiculous. This is my house as much as yours." Nathan's jaw tightened. "No, it isn't. I've read everything. I've seen the proof. The lies. The emails. The hotel. You were planning to leave me the moment the estate was secured.
Her eyes flicked to me, cold and desperate. You poisoned him against me.
I stepped forward slowly, hands calm at my sides. I didn't poison anyone. Sable, I simply stopped protecting your lies. The children stood on the stairs, clinging to the railing. Ava's eyes brimmed with tears. Liam whispered, "Grandma, what's happening?" I forced a smile, soft and steady. "It's all right, darlings. Grown-ups sometimes forget who they are, but they always remember eventually." Sable snapped, her voice rising like a whip. "You think you can play queen of the castle now, Nathan? Listen to me. Your mother forged those papers. She's manipulating you." Nathan's voice broke as he shouted, louder than I'd ever heard him. "Stop. Sable. Just stop." The silence after rang through the house. He turned to her, his face wet with shame. "I regret every moment I let you treat my mother like she was nothing." Her face twisted, rage flooding her voice. "You'll regret this. Both of you. I'll take the children. I'll take everything." I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Caleb, my lawyer. "Change the locks," I said, eyes never leaving hers. "Activate the protective orders." Sable's laugh cracked. Hysterical. "Protective orders. You think a piece of paper will keep me out?" I met her gaze, steady as stone. Not paper. Sable. Truth. And truth doesn't unlock doors, it closes them. 15 minutes later, she stormed down the stairs dragging a suitcase. Her heels struck the hardwood with a rhythm that sounded like defeat. At the threshold, she turned back, her face streaked with smeared lipstick and fury. "You'll regret this, Cassandra. You'll die alone." I stepped closer, the magnolia blossoms visible through the window behind me. Maybe, but I'd rather die alone with dignity than live surrounded by betrayal. The door slammed. Her car engine roared down the drive. And then there was silence. Real silence. Nathan sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. His voice cracked. Muffled, "Mom. I let it happen. I let her push you into the garage. I laid Gordon's old blanket across his shoulders. "Hush, son. Your father always said a strong man isn't one who never falls. It's the one who stands back up." He looked up, eyes red but clearer than I'd seen in years. He nodded, silent but resolute. That night, I unlocked the master bedroom for the first time in months. The drapes still smelled faintly of lavender. Gordon's armchair still sat in the corner. I stood at the window, looking out at the magnolia tree he'd planted. Moonlight washed over it, silver and soft. I whispered, "I'm home, Gordon." And for the first time since the funeral, I slept in my bed not as a maid, not as an exile, but as Cassandra Reed, rightful mistress of her house. In the garage that once confined me, I left one final note in the notebook, day 42. Exile ended. Truth restored. Silence has spoken. Old age wisdom says every exile ends, one way or another. And did you know, some historians argue that exile doesn't destroy a person, it sharpens them. Looking back, I believe it, because in being cast out, I rediscovered the strength to walk back in. 3 days after Sable's departure, the doorbell rang. I wasn't surprised. It's in a betrayer's nature to come back and test the locks. When I peeked through the curtain, there she was, standing beside Derek Cole in his slick gray suit, briefcase in hand.
I opened the door slowly. Sunlight poured across the porch, but the shadow of their intentions was darker than any storm.
Mrs. Reed,
Derek said smoothly, as though this were a business call, not an ambush.
We're here to resolve matters.
Civilly,
I stepped aside. Come in, I said, though my voice held no warmth. I already knew the game they'd try to play.
Sable perched on the sofa, posture tight, lipstick reapplied like armor. Derek placed an envelope on the table.
We're only asking for a small settlement, $3 million, for the children, of course.
I let out a short laugh, sharp as breaking glass.
$3 million, for stability. How noble of you. Sable's voice trembled as she added, You have more than enough. Don't be selfish. Think of Ava and Liam.
I leaned forward, my tone soft but lethal. If you wanted to think of them, you wouldn't have left them alone while you laughed in a hotel lobby.
Her cheeks flushed. But Derek pressed on, his smile fading at the edges. Refuse, and we'll go legal. At your age, Mrs. Reed, it won't take much for a court to deem you incompetent. Control could easily pass to Nathan, or another guardian.
For a moment, the room was silent except for the ticking clock. Then I rose slowly, walked to the cabinet, and returned with a black folder. I set it down in front of him with care. I know about your debts, Mr. Cole. 200,000 to a Dallas casino. And I know about the forged signature in that Austin deal. If I file this, your career dissolves before the ink dries. His face drained of color. He stammered, You can't know that.
I tilted my head. I know more than you think. Sable turned to him in horror.
Derek. And then I twisted the blade gently.
I opened my laptop, the screen glowing with the video of her laughing at the hotel, Derek's hand brushing hers, the envelope sliding across the table. Her face went pale, tears springing to her eyes.
You're cruel, she whispered. I just wanted security for my kids. I closed the laptop softly. No, you wanted greed for yourself. Don't confuse the two. They left without another word, Derek's shoulders sagging, Sable sobbing quietly into her hands. The door shut behind them with a final, decisive click. I stood still, breathing deep. For the first time, the house felt light again, like the walls themselves had sighed with relief.
That evening, I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and carried it to the porch. The magnolia blossoms swayed in the dusk, fragrant and steady, as if Gordon himself were reminding me, the storm is passing. Cass.
That night, in my notebook, I wrote Day 47, threat neutralized, house reclaimed, dignity intact. Old age wisdom says wolves don't leave on their own. You have to open the door and show them out.
And here's a curious fact in medieval times. Exile was considered worse than death because it stripped a person of their name and home. I smiled as I closed the notebook, because today, it wasn't me in exile anymore. It was her.
3 days later, Caleb called. His voice was steady, the voice of a man who deals in storms. Cassandra, the protective orders are filed.
Sable and Derek can't come near you. Nathan, or the children for 2 years. If they try, the police will handle it.
I sat on the porch with the morning light spilling across the magnolia tree. For the first time in months, I felt the air press soft against my skin. Not heavy. Thank you. Caleb, I said quietly. I don't want to see them again. Then you won't, he assured me. That afternoon, Nathan returned from the courthouse, shoulders bent, tie loose. He dropped a stack of papers onto the dining table. It's done. Mom, the divorce is filed. I turned in all the evidence, emails, photos, recordings. The lawyer says it will be swift.
He slumped into a chair, covering his face with his hands. I let it go too far. I let you suffer in silence.
I pulled Gordon's old wool blanket from the sofa and draped it over his shoulders. No more apologies. Nathan, a wound doesn't heal by picking at it. Let it scar. Let it remind you. But don't let it own you. He looked up, eyes red, and nodded. The Houston Chronicle broke the story a week later. Real estate broker Derek Cole investigated for fraud and extortion. His photo showed him leaving court with his head down, his once polished grin erased. Another column hinted at a whistleblower widow of the late Gordon Reed provided key evidence. I folded the paper neatly and tucked it into my notebook. Not as a trophy, just a record. Justice deserved to be remembered. Life inside the Reed house began to soften. Ava and Liam no longer looked at me with hesitation. Ava leaned close one afternoon and whispered, "Grandma, I like it better now. It feels like home again." I kissed her forehead. That's because truth cleans a house better than soap.
At night, I heard Nathan reading letters Gordon once wrote. His voice steady as he shared them with his children, and in their laughter, in their questions about the grandfather they barely remembered, I felt something stir in me that had been buried under betrayal hope.
Weeks passed, and I met with Caleb one last time to sign the paperwork for the Reed Foundation scholarship. A trust for Ava and Liam, but also for other children who needed it. As I signed with Gordon's fountain pen, I whispered, "We're planting seeds again. Gordon, seeds for futures you'd be proud of." Caleb smiled. Gordon always said you were the one who planted value. Cassandra? He just held the soil steady.
That evening, I stood at the upstairs window, looking out over the magnolia tree bathed in golden light. For months, that tree had been the only steady witness to my humiliation. Now, it stood tall as the guardian of my return.
And I thought exile is temporary. Dignity is permanent.
In my notebook that night, I wrote day 60. Silence no longer needed. Justice restored. Preparing for peace. Old age wisdom says the loudest victories are the quiet ones, the ones that leave no ashes behind. And here's a debatable truth some scholars argue. Forgiveness is the highest form of justice. I don't know if I agree, but I do know this: letting go of bitterness felt lighter than carrying it.
And for the first time, I was ready to live not in silence, but in peace. 3 months later, I packed a single suitcase. No rush, no drama, just folded dresses, Gordon's fountain pen, and my leather notebook filled with every note of betrayal and survival. Nathan hugged me at the door, his eyes damp. "Mom, are you sure the house is yours now?" I smiled softly. "That house belongs to you and the children. I need to find myself again. Somewhere Gordon once promised me peace." The flight to Cancun was smooth, the sea below spreading like blue silk beneath the clouds. By the time I reached Azure Cove Villa, the sun was dropping low, turning the waves gold. The villa stood waiting, white walls glowing, palm trees swaying, windows open toward the ocean. When I pushed the door open, the scent of salt and old wood wrapped around me like an embrace. Gordon's painting still hung on the wall. His rocking chair faced the sea. Our wedding photo rested on the mantel, the glass catching the last light of day. I whispered, "I'm home." Gordon.
In the weeks that followed, the villa became more than a memory. Each morning, I walked the shoreline with Gordon's old straw hat shading my face. Each footprint the waves erased reminded me the past cannot hold me anymore.
I volunteered at the local hospital, guiding lost tourists, comforting the sick. A young nurse told me, "Senora Reed, you bring peace with you." I smiled. Maybe because storms had already carved me into something softer, steadier. Every Sunday, Nathan and the children called. Their laughter spilled through the screen. Ava's sketches held up to the camera. Liam bragging about his history grades. Nathan's face carried less weight now, his voice steadier. "You seem free, Mom," he said once. I answered, "That's because I am. And freedom isn't about leaving. It's about no longer being afraid." One quiet evening, I sat on the balcony with tea, watching the horizon melt from gold to violet. A text buzzed on my phone, Cassandra. "I'm sorry for everything. Sable." I stared at it for a long moment, then pressed delete. Not in anger, simply because her words no longer had power. Forgiveness doesn't always mean opening the door again. Sometimes it means locking it and walking toward the sea. I closed my notebook that night. Writing only one last line, I lost everything I thought mattered. And in losing it, I found myself. Old age wisdom says dignity isn't given, it's reclaimed. And here's one final thought. Historians still debate whether survival is about strength or adaptation. I believe it's neither. Survival is about knowing when to stay silent and when to finally speak. The waves answered me that night, steady and endless. And in their rhythm, I knew my story had closed not with bitterness, but with peace. When Gordon died, I thought grief had already taken everything. But the true wound began after the funeral. When my daughter-in-law, Sable, shoved my luggage into the garage and told me I'd be sleeping beside the dogs. I endured her cruelty in silence, cooking her meals, scrubbing her floors, while my son Nathan hid behind excuses. Yet silence, as Gordon once told me, is not weakness, it's a weapon. What Sable never imagined was that Gordon had already safeguarded every asset, $19 million, investments, even our villa in Cancun, solely in my name. So I waited, watching her mask slip. I followed her to the hotel where she met her lover Derek, captured her betrayal on video, and uncovered the emails plotting to divorce Nathan and lock me away in a nursing home. Piece by piece, I gathered her lies until the weight of truth was too heavy to deny. When Nathan finally read his father's will and saw Sable's deception, her empire of arrogance collapsed. Protective orders followed. Derek faced fraud charges, and Sable was cast out not by me alone, but by the very son she thought she controlled. In the quiet that followed, I reclaimed my house, my dignity, and my peace. I founded a scholarship in Gordon's name, tended to my grandchildren's laughter, and returned to our seaside villa where the waves washed away the last traces of humiliation. I learned betrayal may strip you of comfort, but it cannot steal your strength unless you surrender it. I had been silenced, but I was never voiceless, and when the time came, my silence roared louder than her cruelty. Tonight, I close this chapter with peace, not vengeance, because the greatest revenge is not destruction, it is rebuilding yourself stronger than ever.